Hi, it's Maria. I'm doing another Maria Unfiltered, and this is number 8 in the Forgiveness to Love series. And I'm really excited that this is already number 8, and we've already put out 1 through 7. So I pray that you enjoy them and that they really, really help you in some way. And I was going to mention, oh, well, anyway, this one I titled The Flying Monkeys in Florida. And really, every every video I put out could really be titled The Flying Monkeys in Florida, because this is what I'm exposing here. This is what I am experiencing here. And many of you are also experiencing the same wherever you are. You may not quite realize that they are truly flying monkeys, and that's from The Wizard of Oz, where the Wicked Witch of the West had all of these. There were like gullible minions, that kind of carry out her dirty work. And so it's when people, betray you in some way, or when people want to spread awful gossip, the people that will end up spreading that gossip, they don't even know what they're doing, and they don't know that they're being used, but they will then continue the gossip, or continue the sabotage, or try to hurt you in some way. And so those are the flying monkeys, because they're clueless as to the damage that they do to human beings. But in any event, I wanted to tell you about the flying monkeys, yes. And oh, a friend of mine had told me she had watched numbers 1 through 7, and she said, "Oh, it's amazing. I had no idea that people actually go through this, much less you." And I'm not sure what that even meant, because we all go through things. And so she said, "But I was really sad when I was watching them, because I didn't, my heart hurt for what you have been going through." And I thought, oh, I don't want people to be sad for watching this. My goal is to empower you. My goal is to raise your awareness. Like when I was interviewing homeless people, I didn't want people to feel badly about that. I wanted people to understand that there are people that are without homes, and yet, well, how did they get there? And why did they get there? And what can we do to help? And so this is kind of the same thing. We are on planet Earth, and we are faced with challenges. And we are here to overcome those challenges in the best way we know how. And as we are here, our soul is here. Our soul put us here, right? Or the Creator put us here, but we are souls. And we are, on a soul level, we are here to expand and to grow and to experience the gamut of, um, of emotions. And so, for instance, there's this movie, City of Angels. Have you seen that, with Nicolas Cage and Meg Ryan? It's quite old, but it's just, when I think of being on planet Earth and how blessed we are to be able to feel anger and peace, to be able to feel love and hatred, to be able to feel, to experience, really, whether we feel it or not, but to experience it, loyalty and betrayal, joy and misery. And so there are enthusiasm and apathy. And so, anyway, there are the extreme emotions. And planet Earth, it has been written that planet Earth is the only planet that by which the residents, the inhabitants, can experience that gamut of emotions. And so that's really incredible. So anyway, I wanted to tell you about Nicolas Cage in this movie, City of Angels. Well, he was an angel that decided to incarnate so that he could share this planet and share this experience with his lover, Meg Ryan. And so he then decided to incarnate, and then unfortunately she ended up going to his realm, or she transitioned, she died. And so he was kind of going through this process by which he was trying to, I guess, assimilate into as a human being. And so he went to this little fruit market, and he got a Bosque pear. I don't know if it's Bosque or Bosch. I think it's Bosque. And so he picked up this Bosque pear and he took a bite of it, and it was just so delicious. And it was just such a beautiful scene. It was very sensual, actually. And so he took a bite of this, and it was just, oh, and then he took more and more bites, and it was fat. He was eating it faster and faster and faster. And then he goes into the ocean and he wets himself. And so you can feel the chill of the ocean, and the pleasure he was experiencing by this wonderful experience of going, into, I think it was in California, so going into the Pacific. And so, yes, we are here to experience the range of emotions. And so my goal in putting out these videos is for you to understand and for me to better process how what we are and how we are to experience life on planet Earth, right? And so this is not for anybody to feel sorry for anybody. It's We feel sorry for people when they don't see it as the ultimate experience for their soul, because there is no victim here. There are no it's yes, on some level we can say that people experience tragedies for sure, and yet there's something that our soul needed to learn in every experience that we've had. And so when I tell you what my family did to me, apparently my soul needed to learn that. Did I like it? No. And apparently their souls needed to learn the karma that they're going to experience for agreeing to behave in such a heinous fashion. But that's not for me to go into, really. As I mentioned, the darkness. There is darkness that we each must face while we're here. And so there are subconscious patterns that rule our emotions and come and overtake our free will at times. And so I've mentioned, that my sibling and my son, took possession, of all of my things, including 10 years of my writing. Because when most people say, oh, someone came and they stole everything in their home, well, yeah, you don't think really that someone really wants 10 years of their writing unless they really want to destroy your career. And take what's most important to you in that way. That's your creativity. That's how you want to express yourself to the world, especially those of us who love to write. And so it was my writing and my research and I had put out 2 books already. I hadn't published them or anything, but they were 2 books that described my experience in the legal system and how men, women, and children can better navigate their way through it, because by and large, most people become casualties, with carnage lining the streets. I love that expression because it so accurately describes what happens to families when they embark on a family court saga. And so, yes, they took my research, they took all my everything, but in terms of my career and what I really loved. And I had to close my company as well. I had an organic skincare company that I had traveled around the world marketing, and I loved it. And it was called Laser Garden, and I had to give that up. And they took all my books, and they took my law books and my medical books and my psychology books, and my books are very important to me. And they took my mother's books and my Uncle George's books from, um, you know, they both studied math, and so I treasured their books, and I had some first edition Shakespeare. And so anyway, it doesn't matter what I had because I don't have it anymore. They took it. But, my eyeglasses, my photos, I mean, everything. And so it was, they basically made fools of my parents and me really in court, because then they forged documents and said that they were entitled to everything, and lied in court about the things. And so I thought, but that was really the least of it, really, when you think about it, because that didn't seem to be enough, because then they closed every future door for me, or every present door. We don't know about the future yet, even though Einstein says we're living it right now, right? But in any event, yes, they closed every door to destroy everyone and everything in my life. And I say this because this has been my experience. I'm not just saying this, but it's been a very difficult time to rebuild when someone is so strategic that they really kind of go after what is most precious to you, which was my family, and of course my children and my friends and everything I held dear, and including my ability to create an income and all the resources that I had, that my family, 2 generations worth of wealth, were left to me. And so, yes, but you know what? That's the way it is, right? We all have our challenges, whether it's in divorce court or whether it's we have health challenges or relationship issues, career challenges. Yes, we're on planet Earth. And we are to see the challenges for what they are and to overcome them, because we can. It's all in our mindset. And if we have a victim mentality, then we will see ourselves as a victim and we will behave as a victim behaves. And yet, if we see ourselves as someone who is going through, yes, a very bizarre, bizarre, beyond the bizarre experience, then we will go through it and then we will find the gift at the end. And so I have to say that, uh, now there's so much information on narcissists, right? And there's so much good information out there. In When I was studying psychology, we called them psychopaths, sociopaths, borderline personalities, um, you know, things like that. And so, in terms of the narcissist, I'll tell you a little story about a benign narcissist. And so, this is nothing compared to really how he had behaved, but I will tell you a little story of when I was in my marital home and I had 3 little boys, and the home next door had 4 little boys, and they were a little older than mine, but they used to play together. And so through the hedges and the bushes, one of the little boys came out and was like squirting one of my little boys. And I don't know if it was really squirt guns or if it was water balloons or something like that. But anyway, they were just kind of playing. And then my son then went and got his squirt gun, and so he was squirting him back. And so um, then my ex-husband came back from work and drove into the driveway and saw what was going on. And by this time, my other 2 sons had come out, so they were all engaging. So it was 7 little boys that were playing this. But my ex had, he just kind of amped everyone up. And he raised the bar, and it was like, how dare they squirt you, And he was like rubbing his hands together, like, oh, we're going to get him, we're going to get him. Or as he did those Chicago Sun-Time headlines when, when he had that PR firm, put headlines about me. So it was like, she must pay. Well, so he was going like, they're going to pay, and it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's like taking it to another level. So these little boys are squirting each other or water ballooning each other, and he pulls out a power hose. And so he gets this hose with this nozzle, and he starts spraying them. And it was like, oh my gosh, I could see this from the kitchen window. And I thought, oh my gosh, this has turned into World War III. And this was just such a nice little, you know, score gun fight that they had, and if they didn't like it, they would have just come inside the house. And so it wasn't with that type of malevolence, with that type of passion, but in a negative way. That type of it was like that killer instinct. We're going to get him. It was like he was really on the battlefield. with the enemy. And so I thought, but that is the mindset of the narcissist, and many times. And that was the mindset in what ultimately led to the the story that I am telling you, because it was from family court. It was from divorce court. And so you've heard of War of the Roses, that movie with Danny DeVito. And I can't remember, I think it was Catherine someone. But anyway, that was a movie. And so I said, oh, forget War of the Roses. This is War of the Georges. This was really, I mean, we've taken it up to a new level here. And so uh, and that kind of ruined, it was ultimately there were innocent victims, and those innocent victims were primarily my four children. And so they had no idea that they were going to be the butt of what was going on in family court. And so they were almost experiencing the likes of the Stockholm syndrome, which is where the victims actually identify. They are so traumatized that they actually identify with their abusers. So children didn't know how to process what was going on, and they just saw each of their parents having such a difficult time with this. They saw one of their parents being the oppressor and the other one just trying to walk away, which is what I tried to do. But you know what? When you are in that type of an acrimonious situation, there is no walking away. Um, but my family had been enshrouded in darkness, and the family members were pitted against one another to steal and to cheat and to betray and to lie, where one person lies about the other person. And so when that happens, then no one is left unscathed, right? Because it just turns into like a poison stew, right? With with my favorite saying, carnage lining the streets, for sure. And another little story I have that I could tell you is that my mother used to call. Well, I guess I can say this because it's the truth. My mother used to describe the sibling who, yes, I am describing in some of these videos, she used to call her the Kutala. And I don't think she called her that to her face. I had never heard that. But it was kind of like when we would find out about certain behaviors, my mother would say, well, she's a Kutala. And so a Kutala is really a Greek word for a large, oversized spoon, right? That mixes things like a stew or bean soup or something like that. And so the Kutala mixes everything up and kind of makes everything kind of like a huge mess at times. So if one person is jealous of another person, or they deliberately hurt another person, or they want to make someone miserable, they're mad at everyone else, then they're called a Kutala. And I can tell you from my experience of the last, several decades of being in that family situation, I certainly have experienced more torture at the hands of my family than I could have ever possibly imagined. And all I can say is that I would not want to be them, because karma is real. And karma hits in very specific ways that sometimes are so well camouflaged that no one even realizes that it's the karma that has to come back, because it's a universal law. It's Newtonian physics, where whatever energy you put out, you send out into the universe, it will then boomerang back to you, because you must experience that which you experience, that which you cause another to experience, right? And so what I have to say is that a mother who would actually be part of a plan to literally rip my four children from my arms, or interfere in whatever type of a love relationship I had with an intimate partner, then they will experience that. And I don't wish that on anyone, but I'm not here to interfere in karma. I'm not here to interfere in anyone's path, because the bottom line is whatever we choose to do to someone, whatever energy we choose to send out into the universe to target someone, it will come back to the sender. You know, what's that Elvis Presley song, Return to Sender? Well, that's what it is. And it's perfect, because that's how we learn really what we should do to another, because that is what we want to experience for ourselves. So when we want to experience love, then we send out that emotion to others. We love more when we want to experience more kindness and generosity and benevolence. That's what we send out to others. And in turn, that is returned to us. And it's the perfect it's the perfect expression of energy. And so I just couldn't even imagine even the karma that my children are experiencing or going to experience or whatever. And it's not my place to wish anything on anyone. I stay out of it. I take care of Maria so that Maria sends out the best positive energy she can to anyone and everyone. And so, but for my children to not speak to me in 17 years for believing the lies that they had heard, because I was a really good secret keeper. So I never called, well, I can't say I never called, but I really refrained from calling the police when there were crazy things going on in my home, because I really didn't want squad cars parked in my driveway, and I didn't really want to raise attention to the dysfunction that was going on in my family. But you know what? All it takes is one. And so, when it says it takes two to tango, I don't agree, because one person can stir the pot like a kutala, and one person can send out such such vengeance and send out such poison and such negativity that it affects everyone. And so I don't know, what can I say? I know that if with my mother, if my mother were still alive, I wouldn't miss a day being with her now, because I lost her, and I was traumatized by the way that she was starved to death. And I would have cherished every moment even more than I did cherish. And so, I would never miss time talking to her. I talk to her now, and she's in a different realm. And yet, I realize that when we don't appreciate things, we lose things. And then we look at things from a different perspective. But, human beings can be so disconnected from themselves, right? From one another and from their God and from their creator. And so that's, um, so when we send out or we have the slightest notion of hurting another person, um, it would never, for most of us, it would never possibly enter our consciousness, because we aren't built that way. We don't have those, we don't harbor that animosity toward anyone else. And so the dark thrives on humiliation and isolation and defamation, and betrayal. And I say this when I say the dark, I am saying about the dark energy that is out there, is um, that is feeding on our positivity, right? Now, many times that can be our subconscious that is sabotaging. You've heard of self-sabotage. And so that is a whole different thing, though. We are talking about there are entities out there, and there are spirits out there, of which I know nothing about. I I'm not into that realm because I think it's a dangerous place to be, actually, because I think that when you dabble in that, then you think you can affect someone else's life. But what happens is, again, the karma brings that back to you. And so um, the light shines brightly, right? The light is free. The light is true. The light is pure. The light is good. And the light is the light of God. And the light is the light within each of us because we all have that speck of light. Some of us have more light within us than others. But that doesn't mean that we can't exercise greater discernment and behold greater amounts of light within our heart. Yes, because that's where the light resides. And so the light is to be embraced and nurtured. And I like to say this, but it's the key to Tut's tomb, right? It has all the riches of the universe that we want to bask in. Yes, there's nothing more for you to know other than you are love, you are light, you are forgiveness, you are everything, you are everything you've ever wanted and more. You are the all of it. Yes. And you are to forgive yourselves and forgive others. And you're here to love yourself and to love others because the truth of the matter is that unless you can love yourself, you can never love another human being. It's true. And so, we are here to be the very best and the highest versions of ourselves. We have a chance to really up our game, right? To be better than we were yesterday and not as good as we're going to be tomorrow, truly. And so, when my son sent me instructions to never bother him again when I had asked him if, when he took my condo, when he took my only home. And I said, look, if you really want this condo, I'll give it to you because in my inheritance, everything I have is going to go to my children. But I'm not dead yet. And so you're going to have to wait until my inheritance. So he said, and I said, I'll give you my home, but I need a place to live. It has all of my things in it. And this is my home, and my father purchased it for me when I left Chicago to relocate to Clearwater, Florida. And so he sent me instructions to never bother him again, to just call his attorney if I had any issues. And so he said his aunt had already given him my home. And there were attorneys from all around the country that were on board with the thieving of my estate. And so tell me what kind of a person actually would say that to their mother. But it's especially when that mother was there during the darkest of his times. And yet, mothers just do that. They have unconditional love, or most mothers have unconditional love for their children. And so we pity the people that don't appreciate us, right? I mean, it's up to them to decide how they're going to behave and how they're going to treat others. We have no control over how anyone else views us, right? And believe me, I understand that that there was a huge network. It wasn't just my children or the attorneys that they paid, that they hired. It was a huge network that was put into place to steal my fortune, because it was a fortune, truly. And in fact, 3 different fortunes were taken from me. So go figure. I mean, there's more there than most people could possibly fathom. And yet, it was almost like they plotted the sacrifice of they plotted my sacrifice. And then it reminded me of like Jesus on the cross and how they plotted the sacrifice of my parents, because my parents were sacrificed for their fortune that ultimately was going to pass down to me and my sibling, and then ultimately to our children. Um, but there was, as all of this was going on at the same time, there was a huge cover up. And so to hide the truth of the crimes of greed and power and control and lies and manipulation and blackmail and in fact, at one point, I was talking about now the inheritance, but at one point, during the divorce, my attorneys had told me that my ex had taken out a life insurance policy on me. I had no idea. And so as he was plotting the slow poisoning of me since practically the day we were married, certainly after the honeymoon when we moved to New York, and then kind of finish that off with the huge pesticide drenching of me by landscapers. I mean, he was going to try to finish me off one way or another. But um, that's his karma, and um, that's just kind of his dark mindset that he thought that he needed to do that, and it's very aberrant behavior for sure. And I can tell you another. Here's a little story, because I like to talk about little stories because I think that they help to explain what I'm really trying to say to you in ways that you can't miss it because it is so obvious. And so, there was a shocking plan that was put into place to jail me on the 4th of July, and I had no idea. And yet, what, the similar plots and plans have been used against many, many mothers and many, many fathers. And so that's the relevance of my explaining some of these things, because I want you to be empowered. I want you to know that this stuff goes on and don't fall victim to it, and be smart. If it means walking away, walk away. And if it means standing up for yourself, stand up for yourself. But just know that it's uh, this has been going on within the legal system since time immemorial. And I'll tell you this story. And this is when my ex and my children and dozens of their relatives flew to Florida, and I lived on an like an island. It's Sand Key anyway. It's Clearwater Beach anyway. And so the beach is private there because it's all condo buildings. And so they all flew there, and then they all started to sunbathe on my private beach. And they walked right in front of me, and they entered my building, and they exited my building, and then they put their towels right next to mine, and they just laid there, but they didn't talk to me. They wouldn't even make eye contact with me. And I thought, oh, well, this is very strange, because these were his younger cousins, and they had come to my home for countless holidays. I had gone to their wedding showers, their baby showers. My children were in their weddings as little ring bearers. My daughter Melissa was a little flower girl in some of their weddings. And sometimes they'd come over for Friday night pizza parties or whatever, and we'd have New Year's Eve parties with all the children together, because I didn't want to leave my children on New Year's Eve, so I'd invite families over. And so I knew these people for 20 some years now. Well, since 1980. Yeah, I had met them even before 1980. My marriage was in 1980. But so that was so anyway, I saw all these relatives, and yet no one would look at me. And I was like, well, they've aged quite a bit, that's for sure, but I'm sure they thought the same thing of me. But I realized all of a sudden, at one point, I went to the grocery store to pick up something, and as I was driving through the parking lot, I had to pass the Walgreens or whatever it was, and my daughter and a boy she was in college at this point, and she crossed right in front of my car. And of course, I was going to slam on the brakes and just run out and go, oh, Melissa, it's mommy, and I love you so much. And, you know, um, I was just going to be so happy to see her, because it had already been, I think almost 7 years. 2005 is when I last saw them. And this was maybe in 2012 or 13 or 14. I think it was 2012. Anyway, and I also saw my son rollerblading right when I was driving down Gulf Boulevard. And of course, I was going to stop my car, but something told me not to. Something just said, this is a setup this is a narcissistic setup. And so I just kept going, and I was really devastated. I was like, oh my gosh, when do I have an opportunity to have all four of my children in one place? And another time, and that night I was walking, and my other son drove by and like screamed out my name, hey mom, or something like that. And so I thought, oh, it is a setup. And then I thought about it, and my ex had been able to get a very unlawful order of protection against me that my attorney said was the worst and the most horrific order of protection that they had ever seen, and it was totally unlawful. And they said only by someone who is a total misogynist would any judge even enter this order of protection. And it was so that I couldn't contact, and it was after the letter I wrote, which I had written the letter when I knew that my life was threatened, and I wanted to explain that I would never take my own life, and I would, and I knew that I was being followed and stalked, and I truly feared for my life. And so I wrote this letter per law enforcement encouragement. I showed it to my attorneys. They said, this is wonderful. You do need to express yourself and what you're going through, because law enforcement told me that, if you don't say what's going on, then if all of a sudden you disappear, no one's going to know that, in fact, you had been suffering all this time with stalkers and with people being paid to deliberately hurt you. And so they said if more women did that, there would be fewer casualties. And so I wrote it, and I showed it to people, and I said, is this okay? And I got the go-ahead, so I sent it out. And then, of course, he filed for an order of protection, and he said it was harassment, and based on the fact that he said he wasn't invited to Christmas parties because people had read this letter, and they didn't, and he felt that that's why they didn't invite him to Christmas parties. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard, because there was no evidence. And he said he was being harassed. Well, there was no evidence of harassment. I really didn't even think about him at the time. I was writing it to save myself. And so, because it was clear that he was involved in plotting my demise, and I have several instances of times when I knew that to be true, and I was afraid. And so, the fact that he perjured himself in court, and it was just like, oh, it was just, she just harassed me and stuff. And so there was no proof. And he said he lost, and then he sued me for defamation. And he said he lost $16 million in future earnings because I had sent out this letter. Well, that was the most ridiculous, because in fact, his company, I had been told by my attorneys and others that in fact, the company that he worked for was bought out. And in fact, he had like I don't know if it's called a golden parachute or something, but anyway, he had made a lot of money by being bought out. And so he had retired. So here he was, not working, and spending most of his time, I think, focused on me and how he was going to try to come after me. And so when I wrote the letter, he then said, oh, she's defamed me, and I've lost earnings because I was going to get another job, but in fact, I'm not going to be able to make any money because they all think, that I was doing things, or that I didn't absolutely, that I had engaged in anything that wasn't appropriate. So anyway, that is a kind of what a lot of narcissists say. And if you go on those websites and read about narcissists are a very entitled group, and they are very good at projection. So however they behave, they project it onto another. And so they say if they want to hurt someone, they will then project it and they will say, that other person hurt me. And so that's what he did. Is I knew that he was hurting me. I felt it every day. And so he was then turning it around, saying that I was hurting him and that he was the victim instead of the actual person who was doing really horrible things, and was causing me um, much pain and much angst. And so anyway, this reunion actually, I don't think I told you, but I did find out later that in fact, um, it was a plot. And in fact, the police were there waiting for me to acknowledge any of those relatives and certainly my own children. Because also in this order of protection, um, it said that I wasn't allowed to contact anyone in the filial community, which is family. So I wasn't even allowed. You could stretch this to include all kinds of bizarre things. So you could even stretch this. One could make an argument, a legal argument, saying that I wasn't allowed to ever contact my children. Well, that is like so ridiculous because there was never any proof of harassment or any evidence of anything like that. I loved my children. I welcomed them with open arms. And yet, if they don't want to be with me, of course, I did spend much time writing them emails telling them how much I loved them. But I don't view that to be harassment. I wish I had letters from my mother telling me how much she loved me. Of course, I knew that deep in my heart, but it would still be nice to have that written proof, have those sentiments um, on emails. But anyway, I did hear that in fact this was going to be a twisted family reunion of sorts because it was a celebration on 4th of July, on Independence Day, where they were going to try to take my independence, and so they were going to they were going to jail me, or it was part of a plan, where they were going to take my freedom from me. Here we were, 4th of July, right? Where this is the land of what is it? The land of the land of the free and the home of the brave. Well, the land wasn't so free, and I wasn't very brave. So, but in any event, it was just further confirmation that I was experiencing, and had of over 2 years of 2 decades of litigation that were just with a marked deck of cards against me. And so, of course, my attorney said, well, you will never have to worry about this order of protection because no judge in the country, unless they are totally biased, no judge in the country would ever, because most orders of protection are for a year, and they're usually for someone who physically goes after someone. And of course, I could have gotten, I hear that it is, but I could have gotten the order of protections against him if I had been in courtrooms where I felt safe and secure. And so what he did is, because he was actually trying to harm me, he then said I was harming him. And so yeah, so these celebrations that they would have whenever I'd lose in court, there would be like they were going to have this a 4th of July celebration that actually I was told by a couple people that they had planned this. But there were, other times there are celebration picnics, or there are barbecues or dinners, toasting one another when they were trying to sacrifice me in court, and when they would win, because I was so outnumbered, and my attorneys said, we're not playing, this isn't a level playing field, really. And so I didn't know what I could do. And so I just decided to retreat. Fear is what, fear everything and run, or face everything and rise. Well, in this situation, I was trying to fear. I was trying to face everything and rise, and yet at the same time, when there are plots that you can't fight City Hall on, and I'm just using that as an expression, but um, to some degree, sometimes we are seen to be sacrificial lambs on the spit. And so, and we don't know. I know certainly. I never knew if he would walk in the door and it would be a Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde, and I wouldn't know if we were outside elsewhere, and if it were a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So you don't know who you're dealing with in situations like this, and psychologists know this to be true, because if in fact you know that someone is chronically diabolical, you will armor yourself, you will protect yourself, and you will know how to deal with it. But in fact, when you have 4 little children, or however many children you might have, and you want to create a loving environment for them all, and so you don't want to create that type of that so that they experience such trauma. And so we try to just put on a false face, and we try to think that everything is wonderful, and that but especially, narcissists. I haven't seen this in this narcissistic group of videos that I was watching, but in fact, there is something called Monday morning dread, and maybe many of you have experienced that with your significant others, where when someone is not feeling secure in their place of employment, in their job, if they're feeling inferior, if they feel like they actually put something over on someone by even getting this job, and they feel like they're going to be exposed, which is true of many men and women in the business community, when they have elevated themselves to such a degree that in fact they just know that they're going to screw up, and that their gig is over. And so it's called Monday morning dread. And so on Sundays they have miserable Sundays, because they are really afraid of going to the office on Monday. And so that was very true in my home, because Sundays were the very worst day of the week. They were all bad. Except when he was traveling, but certainly on Sundays. And that is, psychologists talk about that. And yes, certainly I experienced that. But in terms of, what can I tell you? In terms of, for instance, my children, I really wanted to see my children. And when I was living in Oregon, I was living in Ashland, Oregon for a little while. And someone said about my children, and so they actually Googled them and found their address. And my one son lived on Ashland Street in Santa Monica, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I live in Ashland, Oregon. Maybe that's a sign I'm supposed to come and go and see my son." And so I did. As I packed up a car, I rented a car, I drove all the way to Santa Monica. And when I got there, it was very interesting, because there was like a FedEx package. No one was there. No one answered the door, and there was a FedEx package, and it was to his first name, not to his last name. And then there were these 2 ladies sitting out there, and I thought, is it a setup or what? But anyway, when I said, they said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Oh, I'm looking for my son. Maybe he lives here." And they said, "Oh, well, it's just a young family there, and they have little children, and his name is Bradley," or something like that. And of course, that wasn't my son's name. And so I thought, oh, well, maybe I just have the wrong, maybe they put the wrong address on there, so that I would try to come in, so that I wouldn't find them. But of course, they knew their mom, and I would send them letters and just tell them how much I love them. And I was hoping that they would awaken and realize that we can be a loving family together. But you know what? After a point, sometimes we can delude ourselves into believing that others feel that way about us. At the same time, we need to see the writing on the wall. And if someone doesn't want to be with you, then let them go, release them, because they haven't awakened enough to realize your value. And so why would you ever want to place second best, or third best, or 69th best, or whatever? I mean, if they don't if people don't want to be around you and they don't recognize your value, then, wish them well and say, okay, see ya. And I still love you, but I'm going to love you from afar. And I will unconditionally love you. But I'm not going to participate in this type of dysfunction. And so it's up to you when you realize my value, when you realize as a mother who loved you and did, everything she possibly could for you, um, then be an orphan. It's your choice, right? And so when I get back to the person who saw my videos and said this is really sad, it's not sad because it happens. Children don't want to be with their mothers or their fathers at times, and parents don't want to be around their children, and they just have to kind of go through that. They have to mature. They have to understand that everyone has a right to their own emotions, and everyone has a right to their own perception of what's going on. And so they will awaken at their own time. And if it's the right time during this lifetime, then great. But all we can do is just to stand strong in the knowing of who we are, right? And to create a life of joy and a life of peace and contentment with others who want to be around us, right? And so as we follow our own divine path, we become unstoppable because we know our value. And remember, it's all about self-love and self-forgiveness. Forgive yourself for anything that you may criticize yourself for. There is no room for self-blame. Okay, we've all done the best we can at that particular point in time, and we're going to keep doing the best we can, and we're going to have our eyes wide open so that we can make better decisions and with an open heart. Because when we have an open heart, then that changes everything. And we realize we control no one other than ourselves and ourselves. And yes, and so we can transform and just live a fabulous life, knowing our own value and trying to help as many people as we possibly can, and to smile and to love. And so on that note, I look forward to seeing you on number 9. So I love you, and I wish you a beautiful evening.